Let's get a word on this and all the other big stories of the day. The journalist and political commentator Robert Taylor is back with us. Robert, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian.
Good to have you with us. So let's start then with, of course, what is happening in Ukraine. Downing Street says it's absolutely committed to peace after the US paused military aid. Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister speaking on latest events in the House of Commons just yesterday.
First, that we must keep the military aid to Ukraine flowing, keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia, and to that end, alongside our partnership on air defence, we're doubling down on military aid. Already this year, we've taken our support to record levels. But on Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets.
So there it is, and it's that view, Robert, that has upset some people, whereas I don't think it would have done a little while ago. I think people would have been quite on board and, yes, this is an invasion on European territory. We know, you want to go back to the 1930s and 40s. We know what happened last time somebody did something like that, and most of the Western world gathered to support the battle against fascism. But today that narrative is somewhat changing.
Yes, it is. And in part, it's just war fatigue that has built up over the last 3 years. And people are seeing a lot of money and resources going into a land that's a couple of thousand miles away from Britain, an awful lot longer further away, of course, from America. And they're saying, why are we doing this? Why don't we just have a peace deal? And the other thing that has happened, of course, is the election of Donald Trump. And he clearly has beef with Zelensky. I think he probably wants to depose Zelensky. He has this curious brotherly relationship with Vladimir Putin. So those two things together have meant that we're suddenly doubting Ukraine. I'm not, by the way. I don't doubt Zelensky or the people of Ukraine. But I think that's why it's happening in the West generally, that suddenly Zelensky is being portrayed as the obstacle to peace, when of course the obstacle to peace is Putin for invading in the first place. And
this idea that, Keir Starmer said it there, and he was really speaking on behalf of most European nations, that there will be more assistance and, there's billions of quid going to continue to flow in. A lot of people have taken that to be a kind of sign of the warmonger, if you like. This man wants to send our kids into battle. I don't think there's any suggestion that it will go that far. He's talked about peacekeeping forces, but that's definitely a view that again appears to be growing, that our guys, us, the West, Europe, are warmongers, and Donald Trump is looking for peace.
Which is a completely false narrative, in my opinion, just as it was with Hitler invading Poland and Czechoslovakia 80 years ago. It's the same thing. We can't appease a dictator. And my fear is that we're going to be forced to appease a dictator because Europe has allowed its defences to reduce. It's relied too much on America. And what it means is that if America pulls out, and it looks as though Trump is pulling America out, he's certainly threatening to do that, Europe doesn't have a leg to stand on. So there's one good thing that comes out of this, and that is Europe will take its own defence seriously.
And the sticking point here, it's kind of interesting. J.D. Vance, the Vice President, gave a speech, and he was talking about European leaders privately want Zelensky to negotiate for peace. I think everybody wants that. Now, Zelensky, if peace is about minerals, he says he's willing to do that, and therefore the sticking point is Trump and not Zelensky. Is that true?
Well, I think the sticking point here is Putin, and everything that we heard at the White House on, when was it, Friday, in that extraordinary press conference with Zelensky, it must have all been music to Vladimir Putin's ears. I mean, in fact, pretty much one of his deputies was tweeting immediately afterwards saying, this is fantastic, exactly what we wanted Trump to say. So what's going on between Trump and Russia here? There seems to be a curious alliance between the two, and Trump seems to be saying everything that Vladimir Putin would want him to say. It's very odd. It's deeply worrying.
Yeah, it's regardless of where somebody sits, I think we can all acknowledge that this is a sort of reversal of what would normally be the case. There would normally be no question that people's views would be clearly in line with that of Western values and not that of a dictator in Red Square. But that is sort of changing.
It is changing. We appear to be getting an isolationist America. It has every right to do that, of course. It's America first. That's what Trump was elected for. But in Europe, we've got to get real now and say, if we're going to defend our own borders against this ruthless dictator called Putin, we're going to have to build up our own defenses, take it really seriously, going up to 2.5% of GDP in terms of defense expenditure. That's just the beginning of what we're going to have to do over the next few months and years.
And Trump, in fairness, has talked about that for years, that Europe has never really stepped up to the plate when it comes to NATO. I know he doesn't go a bundle on NATO, but, defence is generally that we're not spending as much as we need to, and we shouldn't just look to America every time we feel the chips are down. Oh, don't worry, America will sort us out. So I kind of understand his thinking there, but of course there are some global components to some of these battles, and I would have thought that if Russia are nipping at the heels of a European country, that is everybody's business. But we'll watch and see what happens. Let's look at this story, which is connected. US tariffs on China, Mexico and Canada have kicked in. Of course, in 8 days' time, they might kick in the UK as well.
Yeah, and the issue here is obviously tariffs are coming in against a lot of countries, not yet the UK. It looks as though Trump is going to put tariffs against the EU. The question here is, does he believe this for national security reasons, to stop drugs coming into America? Is that his primary motivation? Or is this economic? Does he believe in tariffs because he thinks that's going to make America stronger and better, able to build up its own industrial base, better for jobs in America, even if it leads to higher prices? It seems to me we're getting mixed messages from Trump's team on that. I think Trump believes in tariffs for economic reasons. Now, that goes against all sort of recent economic judgment that tariffs lead to a lack of prosperity. They hurt everyone. But again, we seem to be getting a change here, not just an American foreign policy, but an American economic policy, and to have a greater industrial base rather than relying on cheap imports, for example, from China.
We will watch with interest on that one, and whether it makes any massive difference either, Robert. I mean, if Canada are putting retaliatory tariffs on, then does it not kind of cancel each other out in a curious way? The only person that ends up paying more is really the consumer.
And that is conventional economic theory, and I've always subscribed to that. Well, that's why most of us believe in free trade. But the question is, are we entering into an era where America sees its own security, not just in terms of weaponry, but in terms of economic self-sufficiency and building up its own industrial base? I don't want to see it happen, but it might be happening.
Robert, stay with us. Lots more to come. Robert Taylor is with us, taking a look at the big stories of the day.